Man, I slept on this one for way too long. Grim Dawn is one of those top-down hack-and-slash action RPGs, or if I were going to perpetuate the cycle of lazily describing games in terms of others, it's like Diablo. It was a Kickstarter project back from 2012 made by some of the people who created Titan Quest, which is one of the best in the genre to this day. Maybe we'll talk about that game in the future, but if you like grimdark, stick around. Grim Dawn isn't as sunny as its name implies. There isn't any initial cosmetic character customization to speak of, but that's fine. We're going to be looking at the top of our guy's headwear for most of the game anyway. I thought about playing on veteran difficulty, which I guess makes the game a little harder in exchange for some increased experience, but ultimately I decided to stick with normal. Also, just to set expectations, since this game has gotten some DLC and expansions, I'm only covering the base game here with none of that installed. I wanted to get as close to the original experience as I could. Games like this aren't usually heavy on story, and this one's no exception. That said, there's a short animated intro to get things started. A group of people have trapped someone possessed by a pissed-off ghost, or ethereal as it calls itself. Ethereals were the original inhabitants of this world called Cairn, but were betrayed and banished by the gods. Now they want it back. That's pretty much the entire setup. When the people go to hang this possessed guy to kill the ghost, it escapes. I'm not sure what they expected. Oh, and that possessed guy is us. Thankfully, one of them cuts us down.
The captain is correct. When they awaken, they won't remember a thing.
The ethereal was right. The war is lost. We're a resistance now, and we need every human survivor we can call to our cause. Maybe this one here can still die with some honor. If they ever wake up, send them to me. If they don't, bury him deep with the others.
And here we are. Right away, the game's making a pretty good first impression with the world design. It is indeed grim. That opening cinematic was fine, but stylistically, it kinda clashes with what we're seeing here. Sort of like pairing up Scooby-Doo with Resident Evil.
Man, like plenty spooky.
You're not looking too bad for someone just come back from the brink of death. You were taken, possessed by the same creatures that have been reanimating these zombies here. Normally I'd have burned you with the rest to be safe, but we've lost too many people to the dead. I need someone expendable, someone with nothing to lose but a lot to gain. Right now, you're that person. Prove your worth to me, and the survivors of Devil's Crossing may just welcome you.
The voice acting quality in this game is a little rough around the edges. I wouldn't call it bad overall, but it seems like that Kickstarter money couldn't pay for a few extra takes. It does the job, though not every line of dialogue is voiced. In fact, most aren't, which is a little disappointing considering how few there are. I guess I can kind of follow Bourbon's logic. If we succeed, the people here are a lot better off. And if we fail, well, at worst we're just one more walking corpse that needs to be put down. The gameplay is pretty much how you'd expect. You click on a guy, and you hit the guy with whatever stick you're holding. There's also a dodge button, so we can do a little dash every few seconds, which is as handy for combat as it is for just walking around. After killing a dozen or so enemies, we get our first level. This is where the real character customization starts. There are 6 masteries to choose from, each with their own set of skills. Soldiers specialize in physical damage and shields with a lot of passive bonuses. Demolitionists are all about a mix of technological and magical fire and explosions. Occultists summon creatures and tap into eldritch powers. Nightblades are assassin types that specialize in dual wielding and cold. Arcanists are basically wizards that deal with elemental damage and tap into the power of the ether, the same realm the ethereals are from. And shamans specialize in two-handed weapons and lightning with some summoning. I decided to go with demolitionist. Let's see an ethereal animate a pile of ash. When leveling up, we can put points into a skill or the mastery itself. As we put more points into the mastery, we get more stats and unlock higher tier skills. To start with, we get a skill that adds some fire damage to juice our basic attacks, and a bomb that confuses enemies. Before long, we find something that will define the rest of the playthrough: a rifle. We saw that there were guns in the intro, and I think that's something that sets this game apart thematically from some others in the genre. Anyway, look at this thing! Blasting zombies halfway across the screen is a beautiful thing to behold. These notes are how the game presents a lot of its story. You get a bit of an experience boost for finding them, so even if you don't want to read them, they're worth picking up. This one from the Harbor Master just talks about an influx of people coming from the north with stories about war and spooky goings-on. He's sure there's nothing to them though. And as we can see, he was dead fucking wrong. I'm having a fantastic time exploring what's left of this town. The map in this game is mostly not randomized, so Crate was able to put a lot more care into creating some coherent, detailed environments than what you might expect from a game with fully randomized maps. There are ruined shops and homes everywhere with all kinds of junk inside, and a lot of it is smashable. Overall, I'd say the presentation is pretty good for the most part, aside from maybe some Xbox 360 era looking water graphics in some places. Oh, this is the first mini-boss I found. Monsters like this are tougher than usual and drop better loot, as you might expect. There's an ethereal rift just outside of town. Mechanically, these are checkpoints, so we can fast travel around the world. As far as the game canon is concerned, there are also the gateways through which the ethereals can invade Cairn. Whatever that ethereal did to us when we were possessed attuned us to the rifts, so while I think anyone can travel through these pre-existing ones, we can make our own temporary portals whenever we want, which is a convenient way to get back to town to sell stuff. I even found a guy earlier and teleported him back to Devil's Crossing. We're looking for a cave at a spot called Burial Hill, which is just up ahead. Occasional signs aside, the game doesn't give us literal arrows leading us by the nose to the next point of interest, but it does at least mark quest objectives on the map when we're close. Inside the cave, we find a bunch of strange green crystals that lash out with some kind of energy. I think the attack graphic is basically Titan Quest's Spirit Leech skill. Take a look. We also get another boss fight against whatever this thing is that's been animating the dead. It's pretty easy, but we're on normal difficulty, so that's not surprising. I picked up a skill that lets us throw a firebomb, but it's kind of underwhelming compared to our gun. As in, by the time its damage over time effect kills something, I could have just shot it to death anyway. Tucked away further into the cave, we find a devotion shrine. We can cleanse these either by killing waves of monsters, or by providing some minor upgrade component, which we'll get into shortly. Cleansing shrines gets us points to spend on constellations, which is another progression path for our character. There are an absolute ton of these, and I'm not going to go over them, but the gist is that there are 5 categories of devotion, and we can unlock more constellations depending on how we spend our points. The constellations can give anything from passive bonuses to extra effects that trigger when we attack or get hit. I have no idea what I'm doing, but the green path seemed promising to start with. Now that we've stopped the undead attacks, people around town trust us a bit more, which unlocks a few more quests. It's mostly small stuff, but it ties into the faction reputation system to some extent. Basically, as we increase our reputation, we can get more stuff from the faction quartermaster. Enemies also have a faction, so for example, as we lower our reputation with ethereals by killing them, I guess we get more enemies of that type to spawn, including hero monsters that drop better loot.
The captain send you over? He must have done quite a service with the dead if he's got hands to spare for old Barnabas. Let's get to business, yeah? Our wind pump's broken down again and we're running low on water. We're all out of parts, so I can't fix her up. Can always melt down what weapons we have, but I'm not too fond of being devoured in my sleep. I'll need scrap from Lower Crossing.
Like Barnabas here said, we need scrap to fix the pump, which is randomly dropped as loot. Aside from the pump, it's also used in a few other places in the game to open up new paths to areas. A quick trip through the old dump gets us what we need, and we even take on some kind of mutated porcupine in the process using a fireball skill we got from an item component. Components are consumables that can be attached to items in order to increase our stats and sometimes give passive or active skills like the fireball. There are dozens of these to choose from. This is another idea adapted from Titan Quest, except there you are incentivized to collect multiple of one type to combine them and unlock their full potential before attaching them to a piece of gear.
Well, good news is, I got the water pumping again. The only problem is, it smells like a sewer. Only about a tenfold worse. Well, I haven't smelled something this rotten since I've cleared out a den of slith ages ago. They're loathsome reptiles, make their homes in swamps and dank caves. They secrete a nasty poison into the water that makes it drinkable for them, but nearly always fatal to us.
Somebody's poisoned the water hole!
This gives us a perfect opportunity to try out a new skill, Grenado. It's not quite what I was expecting based on the name, but I can't say I'm disappointed. This is one of those skills that I will never get tired of using, and the cooldown isn't even that long. We also hit level 10 while we're down here, which is a huge milestone in our character progression. You see, we get to pick not one, but 2 masteries, which define our character's skill and class. Mixing masteries was Titan Quest's biggest gameplay systems idea, and it makes a welcome return here. I gotta be real with you, the occultist seems extremely cool. He's basically the guy on the box, if there were such a thing, and going pistol and book seems like fun. That said, I'm really enjoying the rifle, and the shaman has some skills specifically for two-handed weapons, like I mentioned earlier. The shaman mastery also gets to do a little summoning, and has a bunch of lightning-related skills, which synergizes a little with some of our demolitionist skills. No joke, there are like 10 damage types in this game, which is a little overwhelming initially. I figured specializing in a couple would make the most sense. Really, you can find some synergies between all the trees, and as far as I can tell, nothing's stopping us from going mono mastery, but we're going demolitionist shaman for this video. That makes our class elementalist. More like gunlementalist if I have anything to say about it. With our initial shaman skill selected, we're doing a bit more lightning damage on every attack, and we have some kind of swarm we can toss out that does a little damage over time and heals us. It doesn't seem that good though, sort of like our firebomb. Earlier I also picked up a demolitionist skill to throw out some lightning jacks that stun enemies, but they don't seem that useful since everything dies so fast. I'm not sure bosses are even fully susceptible to stuns. Speaking of which, this Naga boss is maybe our first real challenge. He throws out a wave that I guess weakens our defenses for a few seconds. It's probably more dangerous on the higher difficulty settings that unlock after you finish the game on normal or veteran. He's mostly just tanky, though with a little shootin' and scootin' we take him down. We also unlock another devotion shrine. I ended up going with this Fox constellation for some bleed damage, and eventual life leech on our attacks, though in hindsight that may not have been the best pick. There's a ton going on with these constellation buffs, and I don't like following guides in games like this because theory crafting a build is half the fun, so a few suboptimal picks are to be expected. At least there's a search function to help single out the kind of buffs you want. This music is given big Wild West vibes, which is perfect for the setting. Anyway, now that the water situation has been handled, we need to secure an ethereal rift out in Burwich, one of the nearby major villages, or what's left of it at least. On the way, we come across some kind of blood cult hideout where people are worshipping the dead god Cathan. They're at odds with the ethereals too, but they're sacrificing innocent people, so I wouldn't exactly call them good guys. The ones here certainly didn't seem interested in any kind of alliance, and yeah, they have their own faction, so I imagine we'll be seeing a lot more of them. The bridge leading to Burwich is out. I guess it's intended to be a shortcut because there's another route through a cave just below. I fixed the bridge since I had the scrap, but I don't want to miss any side quests or shrines that might be down there. The cave is mostly full of the usual bugs and other critters, along with more of the slith. There's a blocked off side passage here, but I need some dynamite to clear the rubble, and I haven't seen any of that yet. Now, you'd think the explosives we can throw around every few seconds would do the trick, but apparently not. The boss of this area is a big earth elemental type thing that calls down a bunch of meteors. Not sure how that works underground, but then again, I'm creating some lightning bolts from the sky, so I guess it's best not to think too hard about it. I'm not even sure I had to kill this guy, but it's not like I'm going to pass up the chance for loot. With him defeated, we head outside to the Burwitch outskirts where we meet a group of survivors.
Oh, hello, traveler.
There's a smith here which would be useful back at Devil's Crossing, but he needs some kind of magic hammer to do any real work. Trouble is, his mentor has it and doesn't want to give it up because of a difference in survival philosophy, basically. This guy thinks helping anyone is the way to go, where his mentor is more interested in helping the surviving military. Well, I tracked down this mentor easily enough, but the dialogue makes it seem like there's a meaningful choice to be made. See, the first smith we talked to sounds like he can make decent magical gear, whereas this guy can make stuff for more martially focused characters, and we can't hire both of them. I made it a point not to look anything up for this game, so I found this decision to be kind of agonizing, though I'm not sure it made any difference in the end. Basically, the smith can make all kinds of items, from gear to consumables, and will find new recipes over the course of the game to add to his repertoire. Burwitch Outskirts is filled with some goblin-like guys. They're mostly pretty easy to kill like everything else, but some of them use guns, which I thought was interesting. What's a bit more interesting is some evidence we found regarding a traitor at Devil's Crossing. Seems like this Dureni guy was working with the cult we found earlier, and he's the one who sabotaged the well. Devil's Crossing was an old prison, and it's said to be a very defensible position that acts as a sort of gateway between the east and west sides of the region. So both the Ethereals and the Cult of Cthon have an interest in taking out the survivors there. I decided that we'd spare Dureni, since it sounds like he was acting under duress. Those cultists are nasty business, as we've seen, and he has a key to one of their hideouts, so we can go clear him out. I guess we should have been a little higher level before trying to deal with the hideout, because we get this big warning on entry. Really, it's not too difficult, though. Like in the town earlier, they did a good job putting some detail into the environment design, especially considering the world is mostly viewed at a distance. There are a lot of neat little areas like this all over the game. Oh, and it's worth noting that we now have her summon from the shaman skill tree. He's some kind of bramble monster that has a bit of damage reflection when he gets hit in melee. He doesn't do a ton of damage himself, but he's fairly durable and can be a useful distraction when there are mobs of enemies on screen. I'm not planning on prioritizing pets with this build, so we'll see how he shapes up as we get further into the game. I also tried out these little windstorm pets, but I really don't care for them. They're riding my ass everywhere I go to the point where I can't even see my character half the time. I mentioned we can rain down lightning bolts from the sky now, and that, coupled with our giant grenade, is a 1-2 punch that can instantly annihilate pretty much any monster pack in spectacular ways. Both skills even have additional passive effects we can unlock as we level up and make them even stronger. We managed to get the main Burwitch Rift Gate secured without much trouble. I find a moderately insane survivor while exploring the village, and when I try to get him teleported back to Devil's Crossing... Oops. NPCs that we can permanently kill is not something I expected from a game like this. In fact, there are a few spots in the game where your dialogue choices can have permanent consequences for your playthrough on that difficulty. Before he exploded, the crazy guy mentioned something about a secret path he used for hiding, but I didn't find it at the time. We'll come back to it though. Actually, on the topic of survivors, I also found the assistant of Kasparov, a scientist back in Devil's Crossing. He's probably got the most consistently good voice acting in the game, alongside Barnabas, so it's a shame we don't interact with him for more than a couple quests.
You're back! Is there anything I can help you with? Oh, that poultry stuff? Busy work. Speak with my apprentice, she handles the menial labor.
His assistant is pretty useful. For a small fee, she can destroy components and items, allowing us to slot something new in, or do the reverse and destroy an item so we can salvage the component we used on it. Later on, you can even use dynamite to blow up items for scrap and other components. I'm having a great time exploring the village proper. There's a lot of awesome scenery among the ruined houses. We're out here because Krieg, the old warden of the prison, is suspected of being a nasty piece of work who's now possessed by one of the ethereals. Before shit hit the fan, there were a lot of people disappearing from the prison after being transferred to the warden's house. If we can kill him, we might buy Devil's Crossing a little more breathing room. By the way, Grim Dawn isn't just the name of the game. It's what the human survivors call this whole apocalyptic situation. The Ethereals, on the other hand, like to call it the Glorious Dawn. They've been plotting this world domination thing for a long time, possessing key leadership figures across the Empire. Based on the state of things, it looks like their plan has been pretty successful. Inside Warden Krieg's house, we find some journal entries from someone called Inquisitor Creed. That's kind of an on-the-nose name for an Inquisitor. It's like someone named Faith ending up as a nun, or Stabby McStabberson learning the trade of the assassin. Anyhow, I actually found a couple of Creed's journal pages earlier as well. He was looking into Krieg and the disappearing prisoners, but couldn't quite figure out how the prisoners were being transported. Well, we figured it out. There's an entire underground transit system in the warden's basement. A subway of despair, one might say. And I'm not talking about an unfortunate restaurant at the end of the world. Unsurprisingly, the basement's absolutely full of undead, and regular dead bodies to spare. What's more is there's an entire lab down here where the Ethereals were experimenting on the prisoners. Creed found this out too late and was captured, though his notes note that he managed to escape. There are also some journal pages from one of the lab assistants who decided he can't live with what he's done, so he decides to kill himself. But since they're raising the dead down here, he has to do it where his body won't be found, lest he be raised himself. Yikes. I appreciate the attention to detail, though. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed because we killed his mutated undead form next to his final note. At the back of the lab, we finally tracked down Krieg himself, and the rumors were true. Dude's super possessed.
I've been expecting.
He's got a few moves and doesn't fall over immediately, which gives us a good chance to try out this mortar skill I picked up. It just blasts random targets for a while, but later it'll shoot a giant shell sometimes for a bigger blast. Anyway, once we take him down, we find out that he wasn't even in his final form.
What's wrong? Now, I will demonstrate my true power.
Yeah, we got a two-phase boss fight. He's definitely dangerous, and we'd probably die if we tried to stay in melee with him. But for the most part, we're able to dodge around and use his desk to mess with his pathing. Cool music during the fight, too. Grim Dawn isn't really broken up into explicit acts like some other games in the genre, but this feels like that kind of milestone. Alright, Devil's Crossing is saved. Well, not really. The zombie attacks may have slowed, but when the prison was destroyed in the initial ethereal attack, a lot of the prisoners here escaped, and they plan on eventually launching a full-scale assault on the settlement. The bridge leading west out of Devil's Crossing was destroyed, which bought us some time for us to deal with the undead, but the prisoners will eventually find a way around it or fix it themselves. We're going to fix the bridge, so we can take the fight to them instead. Before heading west, I managed to find that secret path that the crazy guy in Burwich told us about. There are a bunch of little areas that take us off the minimap like this throughout the game. They usually just lead to little nooks with treasure, but in this case we find an entirely new cave leading to a small graveyard area. Pretty cool. There's one more thing I want to do before we leave town for New Frontiers. See, I've been trying out every skill I unlock in both trees, and some I'm just not using. Not to mention there's only so much room on the skill bar. Technically we can swap to a second bar for double the space, but I'm not willing to get that sweaty for this game. To that end, I decided to chat with a spirit guide who's actually the witch lady from the opening cinematic to do a little respecking. It's not possible to change masteries, but both skill points and devotion points are fair game. This lets me claw back a few skill points so we can unlock some new stuff. All this respecking costs money, called iron in this game, and it gets more expensive the more we do it. Money was never a problem for me for the entire playthrough though. We should also talk about stat points real quick. There are 3 that we can raise: Physique, Cunning, and Spirit, which is mercifully simple considering all the damage types and other secondary stats in the game. Physique gives us more HP and health regen, Cunning increases our physical related damage and improves our crits, and Spirit is all about magic damage types, energy for our active skills, and also gives a small increase to HP. Every time we level up, we get a stat point to spend, which actually translates into 5 points for whatever we want to put it in. Also, as we add skill points to our base masteries, we get a boost to health, energy, and all 3 stats, though different masteries give different amounts. I assume stats matter a bit more in the higher difficulties, but so far they're mostly just gatekeeping what kind of gear we can wear, since almost everything has a minimum requirement. It hasn't been a problem though, and I like keeping a reserve of 5 to 10 points in case there's something new I'm dying to put on. We're primarily focusing on Cunning, which is the main requirement for most if not all guns, with just enough physique to wear whatever armor we find. Spirit? That's for nerds. Oh, and I don't think there's any way to respec stat points, so it's worth spending them a little more carefully. With our build tightened up, it's time to head west, or northwest, more accurately. We're trading in the cool hues of undeath for the warm, sunny vibes of the American Wild West. Actually, the game has a day-night cycle, which you've probably noticed, but I'm not sure if it does anything beyond changing the aesthetics of our path of destruction. Oh, and I do mean the Wild West. Just steps past the bridge, we're in a rootin' tootin' shootin' battle with them Crownley boys, the former prisoners we were told about. We've seen ghouls and ghosts in a medieval setting a million times, and it's a classic, but I'm thinking American history is an underutilized vehicle for horror or fantasy mashups in gaming. Where's the video game version of something like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter? Actually, it looks like there was a mobile game, but it's basically lost media at this point, at least as far as I can tell. I'm talking about a more traditional game anyway. Hey, look! This guy's about to burn his family alive inside their home to spare them from the hardship of the New World Order. How considerate. Yeah, stop it. Go suffer back in Devil's Crossing like everybody else. The Rovers, or Rowari as they're sometimes called, have a camp out here. It's yet another faction to interact with. Rovers claim to dislike violence, like some kind of post-apocalyptic Quakers, but I have some doubts. The Crownley gang set up a barricade along the road, and Bernard here wants us to blow it up so people can travel in peace. Yeah, they're adverse to violence unless somebody else is doing it on their behalf is more like it. Whatever, blowing things up is kind of what this build is all about, though again, our skills aren't enough. Instead, we need to head into the nearby mines and find some dynamite. The mines are predictably full of more gang members, but they also have wasp and ghost infestations, which gives them a little more variety. They're mostly pretty small side areas though. A stick of dynamite or two is easy enough to find, which makes short work of the barrier. That opens up the path to Cronley's hideout, which is just another mine. Not unlike Krieg, he's been doing some experiments on his subordinates. In this case, trying to turn them into super soldiers with warpstone. Ethereal crystals. Even super soldiers aren't going to do much against our arsenal of fire and lightning though, and oh, look who it is! That traitor Dureni!
What do you want?
I showed him mercy when he got mixed up with the Cthon cultists, and he betrayed us again, over some bullshit with bourbon. Like I was saying, magic crystals ain't shit compared to overwhelming firepower. There's not gonna be a third chance.
So Bourbon's dog has come barking. You should give up trying to act the savior. It doesn't suit you.
Supposedly, the Ethereals like to target people with a lust for power because they're easier to manipulate and control. Cronley, however likely of a target, is not possessed. He's just an asshole who's siding with the Ethereals anyway. He talks a tough game, but I'd say he's easier than Krieg. He doesn't even have 2 phases. Pathetic. I also destroyed his lab for good measure. Better to not let someone else try to pick up where he left off. You know, the Cronley gang has its own faction, but this small section of the game is all we ever see of them. I feel like Craig could have expanded this area a bit, or found some other places to sprinkle in more gangsters. We aren't done with the frontier theming yet, so imagine how cool it would have been to fight through a proper Wild West town full of these guys. The closest we got was a couple camps in the hills. Surely now Devil's Crossing is saved.
Come, friend. Share a glass of clean water with old Barnabas to celebrate your victory in Burwitch. Right to business, then. Before the world fell apart, Burwitch got its food stocks from the vast farmlands to the northwest. With the bridge repaired, we need to find a way back to Homestead. The journey will take you far to the northwest, and I haven't a clue what's out there. Start by following the road out into the Arcovian foothills, all the way through Old Arcovia. With luck, the old coastal bridge near Twin Falls still stands.
The bridge Barnabas mentioned that leads straight to Homestead is out, and of course, it's one we can't just fix up with scrap. So we have to go through Old Arcovia, which is full of more, but slightly different undead. In the ruins, we meet up with a necromancer and his ghost buddy who want to clear out some of the more powerful, malevolent spirits in the Undercity. Sure, we can help with that. Arcovia is actually one of the more fleshed out bits of the game world, so let's do a quick lore drop while we blast our way through. We'll come to find out that the greedy oligarchs of ancient Arcovia, a once prosperous civilization in decline, tried to appease an angry populace by using the necromancers of the time as scapegoats. Except the greatest of them, Oroboruk, couldn't be killed despite all efforts after he was captured and tortured. Ultimately, Oroboruk tricked the oligarchs into performing a ritual that he said would give them eternal life, and well, I think it's fair to say that he may have omitted some key details about the end result. The entire populace of Arcovia was cursed with undeath because the people in power were fucking stupid. Well, almost the entire populace. The rovers we met earlier are the wandering descendants of the people who were smart enough to get the hell out of town, though there's a bit more to their story that I'm not going to get into. For a while, there was a mix of undead and living citizens in Arcovia, which actually sounds a lot more interesting than the ruins we're smashing through. During that time, the newborn children were also cursed, turning into harpies, and on top of that, the undead Arcovians couldn't be destroyed. Now you might be wondering, how were we able to destroy them then? Yeah, maybe we should just keep shooting instead of thinking about that too hard. This is one of those situations where some time travel shenanigans would have been entirely welcome. What do you suppose it's like to be one of the last living, cursed people in a city of undead? That's potentially a game all by itself. By the way, before going west, I farmed up enough dynamite to open that blocked path we found earlier in the cave by the Burwitch Bridge. It was just a small area with a bunch of undead and a boss. I missed it at the time, but I'm playing through the game again with a different character, and I found a lore note that indicates the undead were refugees from Arcovia. Well, fleeing the city clearly didn't save them. I assume because they got out after the curse hit, unlike the rovers, or that the rovers have some other form of protection. Once we've killed all the guys on our hit list, the ghost from earlier gives us the blueprint to make skeleton keys, which unlock the gates to special optional dungeons, one of which is conveniently right here. He says the enemies within are more powerful than what we've faced so far, but I went for it and managed alright, though there were a couple close calls. Actually, we haven't died once yet. Maybe I should have enabled veteran mode. If we do die in one of these areas, we can't re-enter until we go back to the main menu and reload the game, which of course respawns all the enemies and wipes out our personal teleportation rift, so walking down here again is a huge pain. We'd also have to make a new skeleton key to get in. In other words, dying in here means restarting the dungeon from scratch. I guess that's one way to create some tension in a game where death has basically no consequences, aside from being mildly annoying and losing a little XP. Also, there aren't any rifts allowed in these, so we can't keep every piece of loot that drops. On the topic of inventory, the game uses the grid system common to the genre. I'm not sure I see the point of the grid, now that an auto-sort button is standard. Why make me play inventory Tetris at all if the computer is just going to do most of the work anyway? Well, actually, the auto-sort doesn't always work very well, but that's beside the point. A simple weight or linear slots system would be a way cleaner way to abstract carrying stuff around. I'm thinking something like in the MechWarrior games where the bigger guns take up more space, but the slots are one-dimensional, though that might get annoying to scroll through. A big quality of life improvement for the inventory is the reusable potions, one for health and one for energy. That's it. They're on a cooldown, but the days of stocking up on stacks of potions to frantically chug are gone in this game, and that's a good thing. We can also get more bags from certain quests, which are presented as smaller tabs of extra space. It's a system straight out of Titan Quest, but I never liked this implementation. It makes looking through my inventory a pain, though I guess less trips back to town to sell stuff is still a net benefit. Inevitably, I have one bag dedicated to all the components and special crafting items we pick up, because it makes selling and inventory management faster by knowing exactly where all those little stackable one-square items are. And these components are often used for cleansing shrines, like I mentioned earlier, so once in a while it saves us a trip back to the stash. And yeah, as is typical, every character gets their own stash back in town in addition to their walking around bags. It's pretty small though. Thankfully, the game also features a shared stash system between all of our characters, which isn't a new concept, but it's a hugely important quality of life feature for a game like this, especially for solo play. I remember playing Diablo 2 online years ago and setting up transfer games so my friends and I could swap gear around. That was a huge pain, and I don't miss it. Anyway, we can buy a few tabs for the shared stash, so while I can't see a good reason for the personal one to be so small in an offline game, we can still store a decent amount of stuff for one character by just dumping things into the shared space. As for the gear itself, it's pretty varied as far as stats and other effects go. It seems like Crate put a lot of effort into supporting as many builds as possible with the itemization. Some items can even make big changes to certain skills, though they're not common. For example, this helmet we have adds a bunch of damage to one of our skills and converts all of its lightning damage to fire instead. Items like this can last well beyond what their level implies. The game has all the usual gear slots, boots, gloves, pants, and the like, but it's also got a relic slot which is a bit different. Relics, many of which are crafted, can give powerful buffs or even new skills. The relic we've been using has a chance to stun or confuse nearby enemies when we get hit, which seems useful for a ranged build. Just about any item type can potentially add passive effects that activate under certain conditions, like a chance to shoot a fireball on attack or a chance of emitting a damaging nova when getting hit. The chance to activate type abilities from non-relic items aren't super common, but they're not exactly rare either. Unfortunately, they're usually minor enough in effect that they don't feel particularly special. Maybe stacking enough of them, along with some build specialization, could lead to more impressive results though. Getting through the Undercity puts us on a direct path to Homestead. This was the dumping ground for unwanted mutant Arcovian babies back in the day. In other words, the road is full of harpies, among other wildlife. The area is also full of trolls, which we'll be seeing a lot more of. It seems the ethereals aren't that discerning when it comes to making enemies, so they're at war with the trolls as well as humanity. Not that it does us much good, everybody still wants us dead. Along the way, we come across some stranded refugees in Ulgrim. Who's Ulgrim? Well, I didn't think much of him at the time, but I found him back in one of the swamps on the way to Burwitch. He said he was a cook, so I teleported him back to town. But
I haven't been entirely honest with you. I'm not a chef, not by profession anyway, although maybe that would have been a better path. As it is, I'm an assassin and former First Blade of the Erelon Emperor.
Emperor's assassin, huh? I bet his real name is Stabby McStabberson. I have to assume that he's way more powerful than we are, so you'd think he could have handled the Devil's Crossing situation by himself. Regardless, he wants us to get to Homestead and open up a portal for the people he's guarding, since they won't make it through the mountains. Sure, what are we if not an extra-dimensional taxi service? There's an area below that's been blasted by ethereal energy, and it takes huge chunks off of our HP bar while we walk through it. I'm not sure if our resistances are doing anything here or not. There's nothing much we can do down here right now, though, aside from killing a few manticores. Instead, we have to go through the mountain deeps to get to where we're going. This is the kind of stuff I love to see. Everybody likes cool bioluminescent mushrooms. The worms that explode into giant poison clouds are kind of annoying, but that's a minor complaint. Sadly, this is a very small area without much going on, aside from some nice aesthetics. Back outside the deeps? Hey, check it out! Pumpkins! If this wasn't the perfect Halloween game before... well, look, I intended to get this one out a little sooner, but the video ended up being bigger than I expected. Either way, the game's too good to give up on just because we're out of season. A little further ahead, we secure the portal and reach Homestead, which is our next town, such as it is. I went back and picked up the refugees, completing the literal fetch quest. Seems like they're fine, mostly. And here's another surprise. Inquisitor Creed is in town.
So much death. No end in sight.
Looks like he did indeed survive Krieg's lab just fine. He and Ulgrim know each other and have been strategizing a way to stop the ethereal invasion. We'll let them chit-chat. For now, we should introduce ourselves to the commander of the Black Legion. If it weren't for them using this place as a base of operations, these people would probably be toast already.
I'll skip the pleasantries. Ulgrim tells me you're one tough slith, and right now that's what I need most. Will you fight for the Black Legion? You are joking, right? We are the Imperium's most infamous, if not elite, legion. Conscripted from criminals and political outcasts and tempered in the front lines of the Empire's most brutal wars. The only regiment of the Emperor's legions that has survived the massacre in the capital, if you could consider the losses we suffered surviving. The Legion is split on two fronts. To the north, we have the Cult of Cthulhu, nasty bastards keen on turning all of us into a puddle of blood for their rituals. I have my best men out there right now scouting ahead. The cultists are amassing in great numbers, and I'd like to know why. There is a more pressing issue, however, and this is where you come in. Ulgrim says that you are experienced with fighting the Ethereals. That's good. You'll need all your skills for this one. Far to the west, beyond the infested farms and the rotting croplands, there is an area teeming with Ethereals that we have started calling the Gruesome Harvest. It is a fitting title as the Ethereals have been gathering corpses, animal and human alike, in order to conduct their sick resurrection techniques upon them.
Fighting through these farm fields gives me Titan Quest flashbacks. There's a decent amount of similar, though perhaps less corrupted terrain in that game. Aside from the bugs, there are ethereal corrupted trolls out here. I think what's going on with these trolls is similar to Cronley's Super Soldier ethereal crystal experiments. On top of that, it seems ethereals can even possess inanimate objects like scarecrows somehow, because there are a bunch out here trying to kill us, and we can beat the ghosts right out of them. The ethereals are cooking up some kind of nasty monstrosity in one of the barns by grafting animal and, presumably, other body parts together. The battlefield's a bit tricky to navigate with all these aether energy spots on the ground that do a ton of damage. While our pet is absolutely dumb enough to merrily stand in and subsequently die from whatever fire enemies throw on the ground, it seems like he isn't affected by these pre-made aether zones at least. Putting old Bessie down solves one of Homestead's biggest problems. Now we just need to finish clearing out the bugs. This nest is a lot less obnoxious than the ones in Diablo 2. I still have nightmares of trying to get through that place as a hammer did back in the day. Ugh. After killing a couple hero bugs, we can access the Queen's chamber. Unfortunately, the fight with the Queen is pretty boring. She just sits there and spawns a couple enemies while we wail away on her. It's a good fight to try out our thermite mine skill at least. Enemies usually move way too fast for the mines to get more than a couple of ticks of damage in, so I don't see myself investing heavily into them. Before long, we splat the Queen like the bug she is. Okay, phase 2. Slightly less boring. In this phase, she's got some kind of AoE meteor attack that looks scarier than it is. Okay, now she's dead. For real this time. That's 2 of Homestead's major problems solved. There's still more trouble to come, though. To that end, Ulgrim and Creed have invited representatives from 2 opposing factions to town. The Necromancers of the Order of Death's Vigil, founded by Oroboruk, who we talked about earlier, and the Religious Zealots of Kaiman's Chosen, predictably founded by someone called Father Kaiman. You'd think that humans would find a way to work together during an apocalypse that threatens to wipe out our entire species as we know it, but nah. This is probably as true to life as it gets. While the lesson of what happened to the Arcovians by fucking with necromancers is a poignant one, mechanically, Kaiman's Chosen has the goods. Stuff for people who dish out physical fire and lightning damage. Perfect for our build. You might say it's a match made in heaven. Allegedly, Father Kaiman found the prison of the disappeared god Empyrean and freed him. Now Kaiman has Empyrean's favor, and having a god in our corner sounds pretty useful for the upcoming fight. Really though, I made the decision purely for the gear. Before heading north to take on the Cult of Cthulhu, I decided to explore this area to the east called the Conflagration. It's got a bunch of those ethereal energy zones, so it's pretty dangerous to navigate. It was worth checking out though, because we found a portal to a whole huge optional area. It's a port to the north that got absolutely roasted by the ethereals. What's more is there's a big boss guarding another one of those skeleton key doors. By the way, whatever kind of creature this boss is what's creating these big ethereal energy zones. The doors lead to the rest of Port Valkyrie, which is another huge area. The lore notes here describe the Ethereal's plan to take over the town by trying to assassinate the mayor and overflowing the city dump. Well, I guess their plan worked. Everything here seems way higher level than us, and we can't even wear half the gear that drops. I'm wondering if this is meant to be more of an endgame place. Though enemies tend to keep pace with your level for the most part, at least up to a point. There are some big mecha ethereals around, which basically look like Warhammer's soul grinders. They've got flamethrowers and guns, and they put ethereal fire spots on the ground as if there wasn't enough shit to avoid already. This entire place is basically a giant game of the floor is lava. Anyway, these mecha ethereals are manageable as long as we don't get lazy. Well, shit. I got lazy. That's our first death. Good thing we weren't playing a hardcore character, otherwise we'd be ending the video in the dumbest way possible. This death in particular sucks because I think we were most of the way through the town, which took quite a while, and now we have to start all over. Yeah, I'm not doing that right now. Maybe we'll come back and try again later. Back on track, we head north and check out the Kaiman's Chosen HQ. There's not much to it, but we can at least pick up a quest to kill some cultists and take their stuff, which we were gonna do anyway. The Death's Vigil base is just across the way, and I guess Ulgrim wasn't kidding about the two factions not being able to work together. The Blood Grove here is absolutely filthy with the Cult of Cthulhu, and while killing them in their void spawn is satisfying enough, the area sucks to explore. It's absolutely massive, and there's no real direction about where to go. I feel like this area could have been half the size. Interestingly, Kaiman's Chosen and Death's Vigil both show up here, and yeah, we can kill the Necromancers. There are a few quests and encounters out here to break things up, but I still think this may be my least favorite area in the game. Ultimately, our goal is to recapture Darkvale Gate, a fort that's been seized by the cult, separating the Legion's southern forces at Homestead and the northern detachment at Fort Icon. Mercifully, there's an Aether Gate at the far end of the Blood Grove. Skipping ahead past Darkvale, Astrakarn Road is our next major change of scenery. Nice view coming out of Darkvale, too. The snow is definitely a stark contrast from the dusty farmland we were recently in. As we fight our way through the mountains, I came across some journal pages of a family from the north that gets stuck at Darkvale Gate along with a bunch of other refugees because the cultists closed it off. As supplies dwindle, the woman and her daughter get a taste for human flesh, and from what I can tell, devolve into Wendigos. I thought I might run into them as bosses out here, sort of like the assistant in Krieg's lab, but I don't think I ever saw them. I have to wonder if they might show up on higher difficulties, or maybe if I just get unlucky with my random encounters, or otherwise just missed them. That actually reminds me of one of my major complaints about the game. While named enemies show up a decent amount, it's almost impossible to distinguish them from regular ones a lot of the time, except that they're a little bigger and they have a pentagram above their head. Moreover, a lot of the enemies move so damn fast that it's impossible to read their names, to say nothing of discerning their special modifiers or abilities. The combat being so messy and frantic a lot of the time can make it hard to keep track of my own guy as well. Oh, check this beast out. This is sort of what I'd imagine an American Civil War tank to look like, if such a thing had existed. Given the demolitionist portion of our class, it's the kind of thing I could see us riding around in better times for the Empire. While exploring, I came across the tomb of Korvac. No idea who that is, and it seems like a totally optional area. It's got a familiar stonework tile set that we've seen a lot by now. One of the things that bugs me is that there's clearly a secret door toward the end of the dungeon, but I couldn't figure out how to open it. See, look at this. I can throw a grenade right through the wall here, and I know there are enemies beyond. I can hear them scratching in the walls. I even tried rotating the camera to hunt down whatever I was missing, which is something I almost never did throughout the entire playthrough. As much as it bugs me, I think it's best we move on. Fort Icon is a little worse for wear, but still standing despite an ethereal onslaught. At its edge, we find the tomb of Archon Bartholom, another name we don't know much about, other than he was a servant of Empyrean. Kaiman wanted us to come here to rough up some necromancers and recover the Archon's ashes, and when I hand them over, Kaiman summons Bartholom's fiery ghost. It'd be cool if we got to use him as a companion, but as far as I can tell, that never happens. You know, bringing back a spirit from the dead stinks like necromancy, but if we confront Kaiman about it, he just says, "Nuh-uh, Empyrean did it." Yeah, I'm not surprised. Self-reflection isn't exactly what religious zealots are known for. Fort Icon is our last town of sorts before the endgame. Somehow, Creed and Ulgrim got here first, and Creed's got an update for us.
Good, you've arrived. Things here are in worse shape than I thought. Betrayal, sabotage, call it what you will. We've been attacked from within. The Ethereals, it seems, have gotten a hold of the commander. Precisely. Based on the reports, Commander Lucius has been sending our men out on futile missions, thinning out the force's defenses. Then, once the watch was sufficiently weak, he opened the gates allowing the Ethereals to pour in. He was not counting on human ingenuity, however. Weapons Master Edric collapsed the front gates with some explosives, cutting off the enemy's forces. When we arrived with reinforcements from the south, the coward Lucius fled into the armory. Until those gates are clear, we are stuck here. I need you to enter the armory and recover what's left of the heavy explosives. Use them to clear the rubble. But beware of Lucius. He has shed his human disguise in favor of a monstrous form, which I cannot even begin to describe. You will likely have to deal with him to get to the explosives.
The armory is just an ethereal corrupted fort dungeon, nothing we haven't seen before really, and it doesn't take long to locate the explosives we need. The former commander turned into one of those big half-mech monsters. Unfortunately for him, I have experience dealing with such foes. Unfortunately for me, this outcome matches my prior experience. Yeah, that's better. All we need to do now is blow up the gate.
Good work down there. We need to secure a forward position at the necropolis immediately. We cannot simply march our forces straight into the necropolis. The cult's minions will descend upon us in force, and we will be crushed before we can even get near the Tomb of the Watchers. Instead, we will put your unique skills to use. Make your way into the necropolis past the Plains of Strife, and secure the nearest rift gate. Once you've done so, Ulgrim will come through with a contingent of our men. With the element of surprise on our side, we will strike at the enemy from within.
Hang on a sec. If the entire plan is to sneak in a strike force through the back via teleportation, then what the hell did I need to clear the front gate for? Look at this massive hole in the wall. That's plenty big enough for one guy to get through. And wasn't the whole point of blocking the gate in the first place to secure the area? I think Creed was just giving us busy work. Though I suppose leaving a den of monsters underneath the fort is probably not the best idea. One of the Black Legion soldiers has a proposition for us. He wants us to kill Anastaria, an ethereal possessed that Creed's protecting, but the captain here doesn't think she can be trusted. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually could kill her, but who am I really going to side with here? Some random captain who wants me to go rogue? Or Creed, one of the few people putting up a competent defense against the Ethereals, despite him arguably wasting our time just a minute ago. Plus, this doesn't seem to be that interesting as a gameplay choice. We can clearly see that she has a shop and her own bounty table, so I'm assuming that attacking her would mean missing out on her quests and faction gear in exchange for nothing, as far as I can tell. Yeah, it's not much of a choice in my mind. Unfortunately, doing quests for her actually reduces our reputation with the Legion. Not enough to make a huge difference, but enough to be annoying. Being an ethereal possessed diviner, Anastasia is an interesting concept for a character, which is why it's a shame she doesn't really get any use beyond standing here and handing out a few fetch quests. One example of which is her sending me back to that first skeleton key-locked area we did way back in the Arkovian Undercity. I guess there was no rush to go through there. Well, I exhausted everything I could do with her, but I have enough reputation to do bounties with a few factions at this point. Bounties are repeatable missions that we can do for a given faction. It's pretty basic stuff that involves going out and killing something or turning in a rare crafting material in exchange for some reputation and other minor rewards. For example, a bounty from Devil's Crossing sends us back to Burwich to kill some zombie in one of the cellars. These really seem like they're intended for the late game, as something extra to do while farming for gear, or when you want to get that last rank of faction reputation rewards. Factions offer either a new quest or unlock a new area once our reputation is high enough, and since it seems like we're closing in on the end of the game, I decided to see what they're all about. The Homestead quest just ties a bow on the reason we went out there in the first place, to secure food for Devil's Crossing. It's not much of a quest since all we do is chat with a couple people. In contrast, the Devil's Crossing quest is one of the more interesting ones. We need to take a boat out to a little island to explore a mad scientist's abandoned lab in order to recover some research for Kasparov. I actually came out here near the very beginning of the game, but I guess I missed the entrance to the dungeon. The lab is full of slith and other assorted creatures. There's a bunch of poison on the ground that needs to be avoided as well. We get to read some of the scientist's notes, and it's implied that he murdered his wife and turned his own child into the first slith. Are we feeling grim yet? Well, maybe implied isn't the right word, considering we kill his transformed daughter just before the end of the dungeon. I guess I should have expected as much. We're not playing Sunshine and Rainbows, Dawn. When we're done, we can either destroy the research or give it to Kasparov. I gave it to him. He's kooky. Not insane. Maybe. Probably. While unlocking new side areas is cool, I'd say none of these faction quests are worth grinding for, since I assume you'll probably unlock them naturally as you go from normal to elite difficulty. I took another detour at this point and decided to get my revenge on Port Valbury. This time through, things went a bit smoother, but it's still a pain to navigate. Actually, that reminds me of one of my chief complaints about the game. It likes to add some verticality to areas like the town here, which is visually interesting, but not something the gameplay was well designed around. Projectiles frequently get blocked by terrain, which is a pain for our build in particular, but what's incredibly frustrating is getting stuck on the terrain. It happens all the time in areas like this, and the only reason I can come up with for why is that the level layouts are writing checks the pathfinding can't cache. If I remember correctly, it seemed especially frequent when holding down the mouse button to move. What's strange about it is that the enemies rarely seem to have much trouble with navigation, and I assume they're using similar pathing algorithms. Anyway, we were almost at the end when I died before, like I thought. The boss of the area is Van Aldrich, the guy who initiated the town's destruction, as well as a couple council members. Perfect! I have some grievances to file with the local authorities. The streets here are filled with potholes, and I'm not even responsible for most of them. My apartment's not up to code, and nobody's picked up my trash in weeks. This was supposed to be a nice, gated community, but it's all gone to shit. So what the hell am I paying taxes for? Good day, sirs. Van Aldrich had Katrin here locked up for nefarious purposes. She's the mother of his child, and it's a miracle this lady's still alive. Van Aldrich also sent their baby Alice to somewhere called Malmouth. Katrin refuses to leave with us to safety, insisting that she needs to find Alice. So I guess she's heading to Malmouth on her own. Well, alright. Based on what we've seen out there, I don't like her chances. With my pride redeemed, I focused on the Rover's reputation quest, which has us trying to restore a corrupted shrine. But to do that, we have to press on past Fort Icon a bit. The Plains of Strife are a war zone, with ethereal corrupted monsters everywhere, along with abandoned or destroyed war machines and fortifications, in addition to pockets of Black Legion resistance. The place is also littered with mines. It's not long before we find what we're looking for, a rift, but this one goes into the void, not the ethereal realm. I think this is where all the chthonic critters hang out when they're not being summoned into Cairn. This place sucks. Like, yeah, it's sort of an analog for Hell, so that's to be expected, but I mean more in a gameplay sense. It's not that interesting to look at, and it's way, way too dark. Maybe it's not that interesting to look at specifically because it's way too dark. Anyway, we get to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here because we got what we needed for the rover quest and knocked out a quest we had for Kaiman as well. We'll talk to him later though. The second part of the rover quest has us going into another void rift, except this one is a massive pain to find because it's out in the Blood Grove. This second rift is pretty much the same as the first. You know, earlier I said the Blood Grove might be my least favorite area in the game, but I take that back. It's these rifts. Once we find what we need, we restore the shrine for a devotion point, and get to chat with an avatar of Mogdragan, one of Karen's gods and the patron of the rovers. He's not interested in explaining the motivations of the gods though. You know, for example, why they aren't doing anything to push back the ethereals. He does give us a bit of a clue that Kaiman may be dealing with forces beyond his understanding though. As in, maybe it wasn't Empyrean he found and released. At this point, we move on to the Necropolis. Unlike the rifts we were in just a minute ago, this place is awesome. It's the quintessential spooky graveyard theme on a massive scale. The grand architecture makes it a great location for the penultimate area of the game. There are notes scattered around from the architect of the place talking about some funny business from the capital and how this project is his magnum opus. Yeah, I'd say his pride is well earned. I thought far enough into the Necropolis to unlock the portal. Ulgrim shows up with that spirit Kaiman summoned. He looks cool, but again, he doesn't seem to do anything, which is disappointing. Come to think of it, we've never seen Ulgrim or Creed do anything useful either, at least as far as actually doing some of the fighting.
I'm going to enter the tomb and see if I can disrupt the ritual from inside. With luck, we will stop the cult of Chthon before the Loghorian even moves a tentacled limb.
Oh, what's the Loghorian, you ask? Just some kind of ancient world-devouring void monstrosity. If the presence of such a world-ending monstrosity feels a little abrupt, yeah, I think it kind of was. I checked through the footage and the earliest mention I saw of it was Ulgrim talking about it sort of in passing back at Fort Icon. Maybe there were some journal notes as well, but I really feel like the introduction of the Loghorian didn't get the attention it deserved. On my way through the Necropolis, I completed a bounty for Kaiman's Chosen, and that got me enough reputation to unlock their faction quest. Ah, damn it. He wants me to go back to Korvac's tomb to find some eye. You know, that area I found earlier where I couldn't get through the obvious hidden door? Okay, so we go back to Korvac's tomb, and yeah, there it is. Man, I can't believe I didn't see that. I was curious, so I went back and looked at the old footage. I ran around to all the nearby rooms, and like I said earlier, I even tried rotating the camera. I guess I fucking knew it! I put my mouse over that torch and it didn't highlight. Absolute bullshit. So the only way to get into this back area is by having the quest, apparently. Oh, I'm absolutely indignant about that. Not because there was much back here worth seeing, but because I found that damn door and the switch on my own, and the game still wouldn't let me through. The main boss back here appears to be some kind of Chthonian creature. I hope Kaiman knows what he's doing. Our conversation with Mogdragan isn't exactly inspiring confidence. These reliefs don't seem promising either. Giving the eye to Kaiman gets us access to Kaiman's sanctum, where he says we'll learn the truth. Yeah, that's not Empyrean at all. It's a manifestation of Korvac. What a shock. Kaiman was never dealing with Empyrean this entire time, and he knew it. He lied to us, and he's misleading all of these people. Korvac claims to be a primordial god of some sort, and he says he's got beef with Chthon, so maybe it doesn't matter. An enemy of my enemy is my friend type of thing. Deeper into the Necropolis, we fix up a broken bridge, which gives us access to the Bastion of Chaos. It's got a pretty spooky looking entrance, but we need to go in here for a quest for Anasteria. And it sucks about as much as the other Chthonic voids. This one has one of those skeleton key dungeons though, which is where we need to be. Okay, this is a little better. We've gone from pitch black to red and pitch black. This dungeon is filled with traps, but it's way easier than the port with all the ethereal bullshit on the ground. This one goes on for way too long though. There are like 4 or 5 sections to the place, and they all look practically the same. At least the port had some visual variety in the town we got to explore. Okay, we're done. The thing we needed for the quest didn't even drop off this guy. We got it from some other boss hanging out here on the way. I brought that thing back to Anasteria, and She wants us to go kill a different guy back in Port Valbury. Ay, ay, ay. Look, I know I said it was better than the Void, but I was really hoping to be done with this place. There's the guy. Take his head, kill the bosses again, turn in the quest. Yeah, this was all for a petty vendetta, it seems. That was the last quest she had for us, though. The rest of her dialogue is just a bit of lore about how she was one of the first ethereals on Cairn, along with the one possessing the guy we just killed. She says she has some regret about what she and her fellows have done to humankind, though, and claims to be trying to help us. Maybe she is, maybe not. This is the last time we'll interact with her in this playthrough either way. I checked over the footage, and from what I can tell, one important question that never gets addressed is, what about the human she's possessing? Is she still in there? How does that work? The answer might change how I feel about letting her live, so to speak. Alright, enough distractions. We need to destroy some blood wagons to disrupt the Chthonian ritual blocking our entrance to the Tomb of the Watchers, where the cultists are trying to resurrect the Lughorian. That's easy enough to do, and I already knocked one out earlier on the way to the Void. With all of them destroyed, it's time to descend into the final area of the game. The final area is just another tomb dungeon. That might sound a bit dismissive, but here's the thing, we've seen this tile set over and over again. I'll put some other examples side by side, see if you can figure out which is which. I think they kinda ran out of steam when developing some of these dungeons. This one does differentiate itself a bit, with a unique view and what are presumably the Lughorian's tentacles reaching up from the depths. We get a bit more lore from the notes down here explaining that the workers who built the place were sealed in with the creature's dismembered parts. The Lughorian was summoned into Cairn before, but it couldn't be completely destroyed, so the entire necropolis was built with the primary purpose of sealing it away in secret, while telling the public that it was built to bury the dead from the war with nearby Astrakharn. Typical Empire bullshit. We were able to kill the leader of the cultists, but we're obviously way too late. The Lughorian has been awoken, and if the stories are to be believed, Cairn is somehow about to be in even worse shape than it already is. In we go.
Take that.
I can't see shit. The Lughorian is a huge cosmic horror type of creature, that much is clear, but there's so much going on screen that it's hard to parse. Here's a good freeze frame of it to get a better idea of what it looks like. Yeah, that's a void beast if ever I've seen one. And hey, Ulgrim's here to help out. It's nice to finally see him and oh, did you catch that? Blink and you miss it, he gets swallowed by a rift and sent to who knows where. So we're on our own again as usual. The Lughorian summons some tentacles and other enemies over the course of the fight, but it never moves from the top of the screen. Given the difficulty setting and our current power, even this monstrosity isn't much of a threat against the overwhelming force of the natural sciences. I don't think I ever lost more than a quarter of my health. It's done. Cairn is saved. From at least one horrible fate.
You've returned. Is it finished then? So our great moment of triumph is soured with tragedy. The cult's defeat at the necropolis marks humanity's first major victory in this conflict, proving that we are not going to simply lie down and let ourselves be wiped out by fiends and spirits. Word of this victory will spread and give people hope that someday this nightmare will truly be over. Yet we cannot forget those who sacrificed their lives to bring us here. Brave men and women of the Black Legion who took up arms in the defense of Uralan, a nation that scorned them as criminals, outcasts, and even traitors. In death, they were none of those things. They died as heroes. But I refuse to count Ulgrim among the dead just yet. I owe him that much. Take your leave and rest. Celebrate a bit, if you can. You've certainly earned it.
This is all foreshadowing for the game's expansions. I'd have preferred to cover the original game the way it was on release day, but sadly, digital distribution typically kills that opportunity. Instead, I had to settle for playing the game with about 10 years of updates and improvements, and just not installing the expansions. Stores like Steam force patches to be downloaded, and anecdotally, it seems like developers rarely allow customers to retain access to a version of the game that's more than a couple patches old. I'd really like to see that change, not just for the sake of my own preference, but because the amount of history that's being erased by losing access to earlier versions of a game is staggering. Here's an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. At time of recording, you can go online right now and buy a copy of Wizardry 8 from 2001. However, the only versions for sale that I'm aware of have the final patch pre-installed. That patch completely changes how the pickpocketing skill works, making it much more difficult to use. It also includes a fix for a critical game-breaking bug, where the game could crash every time you try to enter one of the final required areas. Potential community-made patches aside, if you want to play an official release with easier, more usable pickpocketing, you basically need to have a copy of the physical 1.0 discs, then apply an incredibly difficult-to-find patch that's not the final one to deal with the endgame crash. And yeah, you heard right. The 1.0 discs shipped a version of the game that may be completely unbeatable. That's kind of an important piece of the game's history, don't you think? In today's digital-only market, nobody would be able to play that version of the game to verify the claim, say, 50 years from now, or dig into the code to figure out what happened. If Sony follows through with ending the production of game discs for PlayStation in 2028, it's only going to exacerbate the issue, because consoles are closed systems unlike PCs. I mean, I guess it's possible they open things up with the PS6, but I'm not holding my breath. So what happens when a locked-down digital-only console's online services stop working? Well, the solution for most people is to throw it in the trash and hope some of their games work on the next model, I guess. It's not going to have any resale value after all, because nobody else is going to be able to log in to download their games either. Yeah, I don't want to see purchases of full games turn into disposable media in the same way TV shows and movies are treated on subscription streaming services, or the way video purchases are already treated on PlayStation. That brings me to one of the things I really enjoy about Grim Dawn. I can play it fully offline. The modern Diablos or Path of Exiles might be decent games, but since you have to connect to a server to play them, they're all living on borrowed time. Grim Dawn may or may not have the same level of cultural impact in the end, but it'll be playable long after those games inevitably die by design. Anyway, let's finish things up. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not going to cover the expansions here, this video's long enough, but there are 3 of them that add new areas, skills, and masteries. Maybe I'll cover those in the future one of these days. I will, however, talk briefly about the Crucible DLC. It's basically an arena survival mode where we have to fight waves of enemies. As we get to harder waves, the potential rewards increase, but if we die, we only get a consolation prize. Rewards in this case being lots of loot. So it's about deciding how much risk we want to take by pressing on, in consideration of our current rewards. We can activate some towers to help us out that will either provide buffs or debuffs or otherwise attack enemies, so maybe playing around those can add a little strategy. There's also a time component. Killing waves quickly can net some bonuses that I assume translates into more loot at the end of a successful run. I think the DLC originally released with 2 maps and then had more added alongside the main expansions. I'm not sure if the one we're playing on here was one of the originals or not. I think this is a fine mode to mess around with for a few minutes, but I don't see myself coming back to it much. After beating the game, I poked around on Elite and even Ultimate difficulty a little bit just to test things out, but I'm more interested in playing through the expansions than exploring harder difficulties for the base game. I didn't spend enough time with the increased difficulty to have anything to say other than, yeah, enemies are predictably tougher, and your resists take a penalty like they did in Titan Quest. I accidentally found a hidden area that I missed in the normal playthrough though, so I went back and did that. It leads to a series of yet more hidden areas, some of which I found the entrance to but couldn't access at the time. I'll let you discover those on your own though. As you might imagine, the game supports multiplayer, which I'm sure is a big draw for a lot of people. This game would be a blast to play with friends over the course of a couple weekends, but my focus here was really on experiencing the solo gameplay and the world in general. It's kinda tough to take my time to look at things when there are a bunch of people running around expecting me to keep up. The game also seems to have a bit of a modding scene, and that includes a fan-run seasons mode with leaderboards, so that sounds pretty cool. Okay, that's all I've got for Grim Dawn, for the base game at least. I'm not sure what's coming up next. Maybe something for Halloween, but, you know, on time? Or maybe I can fit something else in before then as a palate cleanser. Either way, I'll be back soon. Ooh, I have an idea. That did not go as planned.